All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone. Great to see everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Hi, Sue, Vicky, Stacy, Sophia, Lorraine, Melissa, Laura, good to see you both. Hi, Beverly, good to see you. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Happy Friday.
All right, we'll get started in about 3 minutes. So if you have your coffee or snack, you have some time to grab that. If you want to share in the chat where you're tuning in from in the world, we'd love to see where you are. Awesome, Susan, Texas. Maria, awesome, you're in Maine. Greg's in Florida, nice. Colorado, Chicago. A lot of Texas friends.
That's awesome, Greg. I'm also in Florida, South Florida.
Florida.
Liz from Florida as well.
Awesome, Boston, Long Island. Hi, Nathan, South Carolina.
Hello.
Welcome, good to see you.
Thank you, good to see you.
Awesome, and just for our sound quality this morning, I'm gonna go ahead and mute everyone. We will have an opportunity to come off mute towards the end of the session to ask questions. But for now, I'm just gonna mute everyone. So if you have a question, feel free to chat it, put it in the chat, or you can directly message Marissa and I if you have a specific question for our community team.
Okay.
All righty, it is 8:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. My name is Carly. I am our Director of Programming and Community Events here at Learnit. And with me, I have Marissa, who's our Events and Community Coordinator, and the amazing Faz Kareem, who will be leading us through today's session on Excel pivot tables. So thank you so much for spending the first part of your morning or whatever time it is for you on your Friday here with us to learn about Excel. And if you're new to this community, if this is your first event with us, we want to welcome you. Learnit is a learning and development organization based out of San Francisco, but we now have a distributed team like many. And really our goal is through this community program to make learning and upskilling more accessible to everyone around the world, for us all to communicate and learn in this space, and also really to help us all, teams and individuals at large, learn the skills needed to thrive in today's economy and the economy of tomorrow, as well as we head into the rest of the year. And so with that, a little bit more context around how this program works. Again, this is part of a weekly community event series, and our monthly theme is Excel Power User. So every month we focus on a different skill to kind of help you hone in on, and if you attend all 4 sessions within the month, you receive a badge of certification in Excel Power User. And as usual, these events are led by subject matter experts, so our internal team of instructors and facilitators, as well as guest speakers and thought leaders. And so with that, a couple of housekeeping items. This session will be recorded and it will be available in our online community called Offsite. After this session, I will share more on that at the end of today. And also, again, we really want to make these sessions interactive. Faz and our team, Marissa and I, will be monitoring the chat. So if questions come up throughout, know that you can ask them, but you'll also have time to ask them in our community after the session where we take live questions as well. So with that, I want to introduce all of you to Faz Karim. Faz is an expert in business applications and data analysis, and truly an Excel expert. He runs and designs and implements Excel and technology adoption programs for our largest clients. And so we're thrilled to have him here with us on this stage for our community for our next 45 to 60 minutes. So with that, I want to hand it over to Faz and let's get learning. Take it away, Faz.
Let's get learning, Carly. I always start off these sessions with the same thing. I'm going to start it off again. I just want to say I'm very thankful for everyone giving me some of their calendar time in the morning. I'm a very lucky guy to be able to share my knowledge every morning with everybody. And I see this morning I have about 126 participants just in the Zoom room. And we're also live on YouTube. With that being said, hopefully we come here and hopefully I'll deliver some topics. And today's focus that I want to focus on is Excel pivot tables, like Carly was mentioning. The month's theme is Excel Power User. Let me go ahead and share my PowerPoint here. And I just want to ask everyone a couple questions since we do have the hour for this session. I love when that happens. I love when we have the hour. So in today's session, we want to focus on Excel pivot tables. So before we even get started, I just want to ask everyone a question. Now let's use the Zoom chat, because remember, you're all on mute. I just want to know how you are doing. And because we're talking about Excel pivot tables, have you ever built one before with a yes or a not yet? Have you ever built an Excel pivot table before? There's no right or wrong answer. It's not an exam. I just want to know how much you've been playing around with this tool. Yeah. Let me know inside the chat. Doing great. That's good to hear. Not that I know of. I've created several tables, used it. Yes, painfully created it. It's okay. It's okay. We'll make sense of a lot of things today. Yeah. Someone said yes once a month. That gets me thinking a lot for the person that said yes once a month. You're going to benefit a lot from this session because if you're recreating the same pivot table every month, there's also a technique where you can swap data sources. So if it's the same data that you're analyzing every month, you can swap the data source. So I'm glad you said that because we're going to see that today, where I build a pivot table off one data source and then I add the whole year's data and I swap it to that data source. Yeah, we're going to see that today. Yeah, because we have the hour. This class is based off our Excel pivot table session. And we also dabble in this type of content in our Excel intermediate session that we have at Learnit. Definitely check out the website if you want to see the full topic list. But not enough to remember how it all works the next time. I totally hear that a lot in my training sessions. So in this session, I have an Excel file that I'm going to pull up. We'll probably upload it to Offsite at the end of the session. And I just want to spend some time talking about how I can use this function, this tool that Excel invented called tables to organize and clean up my data. And that's going to essentially be the source data for my pivot table reports. A pivot table report is essentially a summary of a large amount of data that's organized in columns and rows. Now from there, because I have Office 365, like the newest version of Excel, I want to talk about all the updates they've had. There's things we can do in building the pivot table, like sorting the field list, which we'll talk about what that is today. Things we can do like reorganizing the pivot table field area, which we'll talk about what that is today. So a lot of goodies, a lot of enhancements. I just want to point out that this class is this session is a demo. And you just want to kick back, watch. I will be looking at the chat box periodically. If you have any questions, let me know. Let Marissa know, let Carly know. I also will be stopping periodically as much as I can and asking Carly and Marissa, hey, is there any questions that I haven't seen, that you've seen, that you want me to answer? So hopefully if they're queuing up those as well. There's something I want you to know, and this is for everybody. If you do have questions and we can't get to it, try posting them on Offsite. I see a few of us are doing that, and when I have time, I get to it. Sometimes I even give them a little demo file, and I'm like, here, try this out. This is a little example file. But definitely, if this hour goes by and you don't get to ask your question Offsite, go to the topics, pick where you want to ask your question about Excel, PowerPoint, tag me, tag Marissa, tag Carly, and there's the link to it right now. Someone is asking what's the difference between Office 2016 and Office 365. There won't be too many differences today, except for the very bottom, the layouts for pivot table reports. We can now set default layouts, which we'll talk about towards the very end. Not a big deal, a very small issue that we can always manage ourselves. Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm gonna come back to this PowerPoint at the end of the session, hopefully in the last 10 minutes or so. Ask you all what we all thought about the session, what we learned about the session, what was our favorite part about the session. But for right now, me, Faz Kareem, I want to minimize my PowerPoint and I want to open up this Excel file. And I just want to describe this workbook that I have before I begin. Oh, it opened up my second monitor. There it is. So I have an Excel workbook that I put together, and this will be probably posted and offsite as well after the training session. And it's just some sample data sets that I use in some training sessions. I have two particular sheets. The very first one's called data, and it's actually a detailed order sheet of certain sales for December of 2014, where we're tracking salespeople's order IDs, categories, products, payment types, revenue, quantity. It's 26 columns of data. 26. I mean, I've seen bigger. I don't want you to think that's as big as it gets. There's like 255,000 columns. I mean, it can get big. But what if someone were to ask you, hey, Faz, can you figure out, since I've sent you the order details for December, who sold the most? Who sold the most? We have a salesperson column and there's revenue. Who sold the most? Now, I can very well, as a data analyst, what I can do is I can sit there and I can filter, right? I can filter for one salesperson, and then I can run over to the revenue and I can calculate how much they've, revenue is 12,368. But imagine if there's 10 salespeople. I have to do that 10 times. And I always let people know in my trainings, when you do something on a computer and it just feels repetitive, where you're just kind of going through a motion over and over again, like a good chance the computer can do that for you. That repetitive motion and process, that's what it's built to do. So yes, you're getting the job done, but there might be a more efficient way that computer can do it for you. And so always start thinking about that when you're just kind of feeling like you're doing this repetitive thing on a computer, especially in Excel. Yeah. So with this data sheet, it's the order details for December of 2014. And then on the right-hand side of it, I have another sheet. And that one's called complete data. Let me click on it. The order details for the entire year of 2014. This one is the same data set, but it has not just December, but January through December. So I can very well build two entirely pivot tables, brand new ones from scratch, or I can start with the December data. And then if I need to analyze the year, I can swap the data sources. Now, there are some things I want to talk about before we get into it, though, like some best practices that I picked up over the years. I just want you to start using tables. You know, the thing we eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner on? Tables for your pivot tables. That's what I just want. And if you think about it, the word is kind of in there, tables and pivot tables. If you're not sure what a table is, in 2007, they invented a tool that you can use for a list of information. That's what this is. It's a list. And as long as your list has a header that's unique compared to each and every other header, and these headers describe the columns of data, you're in pretty good shape to insert a table. You can convert this list to a table. And the reason why I said insert is because you typically do that from the insert tab. So let me click on my insert tab here. And I'm just going to take a screenshot of this here. Inside of my insert tab, I have a tables command group. We're going to be talking about this for the hour. The first thing is the best practice is I just want you to start using tables when creating pivot tables. Before I do this, I just want to ask you, how many of us are currently doing this with a yes, I am, or a not yet? If you're not, you can always go back and create these tables, even though the pivot table is already created. Remember that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is show you. I still work in 2007. That's okay. Just remember that that's unsupported now. So if something goes wrong and all your files get corrupted, it's unsupported and Microsoft won't be able to help you with that. Yeah, so and you know, a lot of operating systems, I'm not sure if they even support that low level of Office. So definitely try to get upgraded soon. Yeah, but it's okay. You still have the spreadsheet tool. And I believe the pivot table function is still in 2007. It just has the classic look. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. As long as it's on the pipeline. Yeah. Let me go ahead and point out that I can insert a table as long as my cell address box, the green border around a cell, that's a cell address box, as long as that's inside of the list. I meet so many people where they spend their time trying to highlight everything to build the table or to insert it. You don't need to do that. Just your cell address box here. And instead of actually clicking on the table option, you can use a keyboard shortcut. And I'm a big fan of keyboard shortcuts. I talk about this a lot in the training sessions. There's a lot of data analysis. They just want to do things faster. And I just want to hit Control-T instead of clicking on the insert tab and clicking on table. And that will insert my table for me. I'm going to hit Control-T there. It automatically grabbed the whole thing. I didn't need to highlight everything. I was a highlighter before. It's okay, we all were. But if you ever are a highlighter, I also want to let you know this, because sometimes old habits die hard. You can hit Control-A, and it highlights all of the data set for you. Yeah, Control-A. So I can just hit Control-A. Control all, that's what I think of it as. Yeah. So there's something I want to do whenever I build a table, and you'll thank yourself later when you're swapping your data sources. And that's taking advantage of the fact that inside of the brand new table tab that just appeared when you created a table, you have the ability to name these things so that you can swap them by just changing the name of the data source when the pivot table is created. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm just going to go and point out that in the table, I've pointed out also in some versions, they just say the word table. It doesn't say table design. I've also seen it just say the word options in older versions. But there's just this magical tab that pops up when you build the table. It might be called something a little different than mine, but it's there for you as well, as long as you're inside the table. So just make note of that if you notice yours is named differently. But you can name your tables, and I'm just going to name this very first one for December. I'm going to call it table December 2014. There's actually an area, we talk about this in Excel introduction. There's an area called the name box. That's a pretty funny name to me, the name box. But it lets you basically see all the named tables that you have in your workbook. So that's also a bonus. You can also use that to find your data sets across the workbook. But let me also do that to the complete data as well. I'm just going to remember, I don't have to highlight everything. I just simply need to go inside of it and hit Control T. Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy. And I'm going to hit OK here. And there's my magical little tab that shows up where I can actually name my pivot my table so that when I swap my data sources, it becomes easy for me. Cool. And I'm just going to name this one, everybody, Table 2014 Sales. Has to be one word. That's why I'm not putting spaces, by the way. All right. Before I build my pivot table, I just want you all to know that in 2013, they inserted a tool called a slicer to help filter tables. I use this immensely, especially if other people are using the data set. Let me explain this really quickly before I build a pivot table to summarize this data. I'm going to insert a slicer here. It's inside the table design tab. So when you build a table, you get a slicer tool. And I'm just going to build one for the salesperson column. The salesperson column. And when I check mark it and hit OK, it ends up giving me this on screen. Let me move this around here. This on-screen clickable dashboard. Let me zoom out just a bit so I can move this. Here we go. And if I want, I can filter my column of data now with the click of a button. My question is this: has anyone used this before? Because this is also available for our pivot tables with a yes, I have, or a not yet. All the time, I like to hear that answer. Available in 2013. 2013. Yeah, so that's also for our pivot tables, but they're also for tables as well. Yeah, a great tool for a visual filter tool instead of using those little drop-down arrows. Good. Good. We'll see it again in our pivot table in just a second. So at this point, I now have two different tables. And what I want to do is I want to create, or I should say I want to insert a pivot table so that I can summarize those 26 columns. Now, what essentially happens when I create a pivot table, everybody, is this little form, this little window, this little dialog box is going to pop up on the right-hand side. And it's just going to give you this little empty square to build a pivot table report. That's what it's going to say. It's going to say empty pivot table on the side here. And you're going to have this area. This area here, I just want to describe it before I build my pivot table. It's called the field list. This field list in 2016 has a toolbox that I want to discuss that we're going to do today. And when I call it a field list, what they call a field is a column of data. So you know how we had a data sheet? We're going to insert a pivot table in there, and it's essentially going to build a field for each column. So I'm going to see a column called salesperson, and I'm going to see a column called region. I'm going to see a column called revenue. And every other 26 columns that's there, I'm going to see all of them. Now I know a lot of us said we've never built a pivot table before, or we said we've done it painfully. You just have 4 boxes. You have 4 boxes to drag and drop a field, a column. And depending on what box you throw it in, it's going to actually change and build a different area of your report. So I just want to discuss the 4 boxes before I begin and build the actual report. Because the very first box here that I'm drawing out is called the filters box. If I were to throw any one of my columns there, it's essentially going to build an area that I can filter my pivot table report with. So if I throw a column of years, I can filter by year. If I throw a column of salespeople, I can filter by salespeople. If you take it from me, we don't really do that anymore. We add things to slicers. So yes, that's there, but I add slicers instead. I would rather add a region slicer instead of throwing the region field in there. But we do have 3 other boxes. These next 2 boxes I kind of want to do together. The blue and the green box, where we have columns, that's what they call it, and we also have rows. Essentially, that's going to build the report. I shouldn't say the report, I'll say it in more simpler terms. It's going to build the table. It's going to build the columns and the rows of the table that you want to see, which is going to be your report. So essentially, if I drag and drop, let's say salesperson, into the columns box, we're going to end up seeing 8 or 9 different columns, depending on how many salespeople you have. For each salesperson, it's going to build a column with the salesperson name as the header. You can also drag and drop someone into rows boxes, and you're going to end up building a nice list going down in rows of each of your salespeople. Now, the final box that we have is called the values box, where you can get a field and you can run a function. You can aggregate it. You can sum it. You can max it. You can count it if those names. And essentially, that's going to build a report that you can analyze and break down and filter with. Let me go ahead and build a pivot table report that's going to show me the top seller for December of 2014. That's what I want to see. And then hopefully when I'm done with that, now the field list doesn't pop up until you insert a pivot table. Give me 1 second until I get there so I can explain that part. But I'll explain what I mean if it's not popping up and if it isn't popping up. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with this original data set, December. I'm going to build the pivot table. I'm going to get it to exactly how I want it. And then once I'm done, I'm going to swap it. And I want to end up seeing the entire year's data by using the complete data set and using that table as the source data. So let me go to the Insert tab here. And this time, instead of using a table, because I already have that, let me build a pivot table, a summary report. And I'm going to build it from a table I'm going to do it from this table here. And as long, remember, you're not a highlighter, as long as your cell address box is inside of the table, you're going to automatically pick up the entire data set. Excel is smart enough to know that you want to grab the entire data from the table. And it'll actually list the name. We're using table December 2014. And I want to put that on a new worksheet. The worksheet shows up to the left-hand side of the original worksheet that you're on. So someone in the chat mentioned to me that they're not seeing this area. There's several reasons that can happen. And let me explain for the people that have never built a pivot table before. There are a lot of things that play peekaboo. And they come and they come away and they go away and they peekaboo. And we got to learn which one of those things do that and which ones don't. So let me explain this. In Excel, as you know, we have a cell address box. Tells you what cell you're on. Now, if you're inside of the pivot table report, even though it's empty, it still says that this is the report. Excel will automatically give you access to three things. It's going to give you access to one tab called the Pivot Table Analyze tab. And right next to it, another tab called Design for the formatting of it. And the third thing it's going to give you is this actual field list. This all will go away. It'll pay peekaboo, it'll disappear on you if you move your cell address box. If I move it outside the report area, it's like, oh, you don't need this stuff. And it just goes back to the original Excel interface. But if you go back, now we're going to see in just a second why we do tables first too, Michael. Hold that thought, okay? When I end up adding a new data source or I end up adding a new value to the data, you're going to see why I chose a table in just a second. I'll remind you, don't worry. So that's one reason why you might not be seeing the field list, but there also are people that I've worked with and they tell me things like, I don't build the report. Someone emails me it. And I sometimes have to edit the report. And they tell me that this area doesn't pop up. They're like, when they email it to me, this area doesn't pop up, as if they've closed it. There is a close button. You can close the pivot table field list. And if you do that, every time you click back and forth, what's going to end up happening here is it's still not going to pop up. So inside of the Pivot Table Analyze tab, we actually have an area called Field List. It's a special button that we can click to turn it on and off. And a lot of people, when they sent a completed pivot table over, they have this already turned off, which you can very well just go inside of the report and head over to your Pivot Table Analyze tab and turn it back on. Now, I got a really good question inside of the chat, and two people are like, that's my question too. Let's answer it. Here's my field list that I just described. Let me go ahead and grab the salesperson column. And I'm just going to drag it into rows. And it ends up adding in salespeople. I guess I have 8 salespeople in this data set. This is why we use tables. I want to describe why we use tables, because today we hired a new salesperson. His name is Fast Kareem. And it's your job as the person tracking this data to add Fast Kareem to the report. So you decided to use tables. So all you need to do now is go to your data and go to the bottom of your table. and add in Fast Kareem. He's from the East Bay. 9/10/2021, and he sold, let's put $1,000. So the table automatically expands itself. It automatically grows. It has included that value. So all I need to do now is refresh my report. I can right-click my report and hit refresh. And then Fast Kareem gets added. Now, if I had a list and I did not use tables, it wouldn't be that simple. I would have to go back into my pivot table. I'd have to go to my Analyze tab. I'd have to change the data source. And I'd have to include that row. And then I'd have to refresh, which is what we did in 2007. Yeah, it allows you to go to the table, update it, refresh it. And also we're gonna see that it allows you to swap much easier. Yeah, it doesn't auto update. You're still gonna have to refresh, but it doesn't allow you, it replaces the step where you have to change the data sort and expand the list. So, which was a pretty tedious task that we all had to do. Yeah, good question. Good question, good question. Yeah. All righty. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Now, what I also want to see in this report here is I want to actually track the revenue that these salespeople are bringing in. So notice how this list I'm looking through, it's not even in alphabetical order. In fact, what Excel decided to do, and I don't like this, is they decided to just go to the same exact order that the spreadsheet came in. Order ID, order date, customer ID. I mean, not everyone knows their data like that. You know, they just get emailed it and they have like a day to work on it. Just know that they have a toolbox. You can alphabetize this area. And that's what I'm going to do to make my life easier. I'm just going to go to this area and sort it from A to Z. And when I do that, I'll have the address on top. And as I scroll, I can find my revenue. Would that still work if you insert a new line anywhere, not at the bottom? Yeah. If I go and I insert a row here, I'm going to go ahead and call this Faz Kareem 2, and he's from the East Bay. I can actually go, I can refresh, and Faz Kareem 2, it can be anywhere. Yeah. And then alphabetizing the field names was right over here. Yeah, we go to that little toolbox. That's one of those enhancements. Now, there is something else I do, and that's just my preference. I'd redesign the field list. I like to have my field list and the 4 boxes side by side. That's something we can do as Office 365 users. I believe 2016 as well, but it's fairly new, where we can redesign the field list and have it side by side. This is my personal preference. That's just how I like using my Excel. I see a lot of trainers do as well. It allows you to see more fields at once. Yeah, so very simple if you just want to change that. This toolbox is handy. Overall, this toolbox is handy. Yeah. So let me go ahead and get the revenue, and I'm going to drag and I'm going to drop it into the values box. Cool. Cool. So I have some salespeople here. Fast Kareem 2 didn't have any revenue. That's why it's blank. But if I go to my data sheet and I add in some revenue, you know, maybe he sold 2,000 because he's in the number 2. I can always refresh it, right? I can always refresh it because we're very easy to do that. It just shows up. Cool. So Nice. Someone said you can reorganize this area side by side in 2007 as well. I've never heard of that, but if you can, that's really cool. And that's really cool. Yeah. But I haven't seen that in 2007. So what we're looking at here is a very basic pivot table. Does it always sum values? How would you do the count if function? You can change the function. It just defaults to sum. Like here, I can get the revenue and I can throw it in again. And maybe this time, here, I'm going to go to this one and I'm going to change the value field settings. I can change the settings of the field. Instead of sum, I can do a sum, a count. Now remember, the if part is depending on what you have in rows and what you have in columns. That's going to be the if part. But I have a sum, I have a count, I have an average, I have a max, I have a min. I have a wide variety of functions that I can change it to. I'll change this one to the average. So it is very easy to change that function, but it just defaults to sum. Let me throw this out. I just wanted to show that really quickly to answer that question, because I do get asked that a lot in the training as well. So I have this pivot table report. It doesn't have any columns. I haven't thrown a column in, but I can. If I wanted to break it down by the region, I can drop the columns in there. Now it's tracking all the regions. But I don't want to build that report. I'm just going to drag that out. So I'm going to throw it out and it goes back to the original. No problem, no problem. So things are looking pretty smooth. My report's getting there. But there is an issue, and there's always these issues I've noticed in the real world where your data is not perfect. As a manager of this company, I have to give out bonuses. And these salespeople's bonuses, that's my job to determine it. And it's actually 5% of whatever they sold. That's their bonus. But I've been asking my database people to build that for me. Can you build a column to track bonuses? And they're like, sorry, we're really busy right now. We can't get to that till 2022. And I'm like, okay, I have to sit there every month or every year and figure out the bonuses manually. You can sit there and figure them out manually, multiply the cell by 5%, or you can take advantage of a tool inside the pivot table analyze tab. This is what I call an advanced pivot table tool, something we cover in the pivot table class itself. I'm going to click on the pivot table analyze tab, and there's an area called calculations. You can design your own fields by using other fields you already have. Like I can multiply the revenue by 5%, and I can call the field bonus. It kind of reminds me of I don't want to call it a measure because it's not a single value, but like a DAX function, but not really. It's not using DAX. Let me go ahead and build a calculated field. Let me add the screenshot to this inside the slide as well. Has anyone ever used this before? Calculated fields with a yes, I have, or a not yet. This wasn't a good one. Every time I show it to people in my training, they're like, I really needed to use this one. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to use it and I'm going to build a field. That's why it's called a calculated field. We're going to build a calculation that creates a field. Let me zoom into this window and describe it before I actually build it. It's just going to allow me to build a field called bonus. That's what I'm going to name it. I'm going to call it bonus. And I'm also, the formula for bonus is just going to be the revenue column multiplied by 5%. I'm just going to create a formula that does that. I'm going to hit add. You will still be able to use almost everything I'm saying for all of Excel 2007 and up. Just those small things like pivot table enhancements, sorting it from A to Z. These are things that they've recently released. The pivot table function itself has been there for quite some time. Yeah. Let me go ahead and build that there. I'm going to go ahead and insert the revenue. Find it, insert, and multiply by 5%. I don't even change it to a decimal. Like Excel will do that for me. I just put the formula in like so. I hit add. And because I have it in alphabetical order, it's going to end up being inside the top. There's going to be a new field called bonus. And this bonus field is going to be inside the report now. And if you want, you can remove it, or you can choose to add it back in whenever you want by adding it and dragging and dropping it. This is much different. When people don't know how to do this, what they're doing is this. And they're multiplying it by 5%. And then they're doing it for this one, and they're multiplying it by 5%. And that takes time. And plus, if you copy the report or swap the data sources, it's not going to copy that over. So that's things you got to consider definitely. Where if you do the actual tool, you'll have it available at all times. Awesome feature number 2. It's only been like, what, 40 minutes, 2 features. I'm happy with that. That's good. That's good. That's good. I want to revisit an old friend. An old friend that we talked about. Do you remember we had the slicer tool? Where did I go? Did I delete it? I deleted it. We had a slicer. That originated for pivot tables. In 2010, they built it for pivot tables. And then in 2013, they're like, all right, we're going to have it for tables as well. So I'm going to go over to my pivot table analyze tab. We've been there for a few things so far. And I'm about to go there again. And I'm going to insert a filter. Because remember how I said it's a little old school to use this filters box? It's because we have a filters command group inside the pivot table analyze tab. Can we use a variable for the rate in the formula? Yes, if you're using Power Pivot, you can build a measure. I don't know of a way not using Power Pivot. Yeah, I don't think Excel can allow you to build like a single value without using Power Pivot. That's a good question. Yeah, Lori. Yeah. But with Power Pivot, I think it's possible by building a measure and then using that measure inside the formula. Yeah. What I'm going to do here is insert a slicer for the salespeople that I have. And now I can go ahead and filter my pivot table report. And if I need to select multiple salespeople, I can do that. And it's going to show me the breakdown of the report one by one if I want to. And if I ever need to clear my filter, I can do that too. Here's the thing though. Things are looking good and my report's almost there. I like it, but this is not actually what I asked for. I wanted to see the top seller of December of 2014. This is actually showing me all of the sales. It's not even a specific order. You can sort your pivot tables. You can actually right click and sort the field that you're in. If you want to sort the sum of revenue, you can sort it by going inside of it and right clicking it. That way the top salesperson will be on top and the bottom will be on bottom. But let me do something really quick there. I just want it to be on top. Okay, let me go ahead and sort this now from largest to smallest. And as you can see there, it ends up putting the salespeople in order from the revenue, from the largest to smallest. And as you can see, I sold quite a bit. I sold quite a bit. Let me go ahead and make this report a little bit prettier as well, because the sum of bonus, it has dollar signs, and the sum of revenue, it doesn't have a number format. The bonus calculated field had a number format. This one doesn't. But I can add it just like I sorted it with the right click. Let me take a screenshot of this as well so you have it for later. With the right click, I could have sorted it, and I can change the number format of the field that I'm in. And that's what I'm going to do now, number format. And I'm just going to change it to currency. I'm going to take away the decimal places as well and hit OK. I might as well take away the decimal places for the sum of bonus as well by right-clicking and changing the number format. Someone said you have to update the pivot table to update the slicer, and that is 100% correct, Sophia. If I have to update this slicer, it means I have to update the pivot table. So if I add in Baz Kareem 3, and I go to this, I have to refresh the pivot table, and then my slicer will also have Baz Kareem 3. You have that right. Things are looking good. I have a report. I have a special field that I've added in. I have a slicer to filter the report. There's also a special type of slicer called a timeline. That's only there for pivot tables. It will only help you if you have something that's formatted as a date. So I have order date, and I have order date, I believe, and shipping date. I also have shipping date somewhere on the bottom there as well. If I go over to this pivot table analyze tab and choose to insert a timeline, I can actually build and filter my report based off the order dates or the ship date. Let me choose order date here. And this is another version of a slicer essentially, but specifically designed for the dates of the report. I can change it to months. It's default months, but I can change it to quarters, days, years. I mean, it's only the month of December, so if I change it to days here, let me go all the way to the end here, and I can track the day by day for December. And I can see that we didn't sell anything on Christmas. We were closed. Or no, sorry, I didn't click on that. There we go. Oh, looks like okay. We don't have holidays here. So, has anyone used timelines? This is something I've also seen. Has anyone ever witnessed this before? With a yes, I have, or a not yet? Specifically designed for dates. Yeah, specifically designed for dates. All right, not yet. I have a little bit more left. I haven't forgot about the swapping part, but I want to tell you a story. This is a true story. I do one-on-one sessions sometimes where I help people on their projects. And I remember a participant of mine had booked me, and essentially it was a pivot table problem. That's what I knew going into the situation. It was a pivot table problem. They didn't have too much information besides the report that they had that was massive, and the fact that they needed to build another one. And it turns out that they sent me a report that someone had built and then later left. The person left. And now the new person that was assigned to build next year's report that looked exactly like that report didn't really know how to do it. And they had hired her assistants to help her get that report to look exactly the same as last year's. So essentially, she's like, here's the report from last year, and here's the data from this year. Can you help me out and help me build this report that so-and-so made that I have no contact with anymore? And I'm like, and we had, the whole day, but she was like, I have the data and I have the report already. And I let her know that you can swap these things. And I just saw this lady's light just light up with excitement. She's like, oh, I thought something like that was possible. I didn't know, but I thought something like that was possible. And I was hoping you would say something like that to me. And I'm like, yes. And I want to show you something. Inside the pivot table analyze tab here, you have this command group called data. When I call it a command group, this is what a command group is. It's called data. That's the data command group. Just how this is called like the calculations command group. You can actually swap your data sources. And because we've named them, it makes it a lot easier to do that. That's another benefit of using the table. We can swap it to this name now. Table 2014 sales. I put the word table in the front just so it's in alphabetical order. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to change the data source. And instead of table December 2014, it's table 2014 sales. It's easy peasy, just need to type in the name. And when I hit OK, it's going to end up swapping the values of the report. It's going to keep all my calculated fields. Those didn't go away. I don't have to build those again. Let me move these all to the side. And now I have this nice, beautiful report that I can go ahead and filter based off salespeople. If I want to filter it based off days, maybe do the months now because this is the whole year. I can see how Jan did in September compared to December. Looks like there's a lot of big difference there. 700 to 4,000. That looks really good. It gets better. I'm going to clear this. And I'm very aware of our time. I'll stop very soon, but if I have info, I have to share it. I also would go into trainings and I'd have leadership teams pull me aside, executives, like, hey, you're about to train my team. And since you're the trainer, I want you to know something. I know my team can build me pivot tables. And at this point in my life, I have so much things to look at, and I don't have time to look at their beautiful reports. And I need you to help me find a way to make it easier for me to look at those reports. So what can you do to train them, to help them build reports that are more clear for me to look at and quicker for me to understand? And I'm like, charts. And he's like, that's exactly what I was referring to. I want you to start using and showing how you can show a chart representation of the report. And that way, if I'm looking at my budget, if I'm looking at what people come from what gates in the region, it was a park map. I know which one has the most access, which one doesn't, without even having to look at the data spreadsheet. Like, okay. What I'm going to do here, let me look at the question in just a second. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the Pivot Table Analyze tab. I'm so sorry. That is one route you can do, but I normally don't. And I'm going to use a pivot chart. You can also do this from the Insert tab, inserting a pivot chart. Does anyone use this when building pivot tables, a visual representation? Good, 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 good. If you collect data on a monthly basis in a separate worksheet, can you create a pivot table to include everything in one pivot table? You would have to use Power Pivot to build a data model that merges all the tables together for you. But it is possible, yes. It's just Power Pivot. When you have multiple lists, multiple tables, and you have to bring them together, you're asking them to build a data model, which is something that only the PC version of Excel can do. Yes. You can also use CSV files and things of that nature. Yeah. If you inherit two lists, say one from November and one from December with the same header on the same worksheet, but separated by a few empty rows, that won't make a difference. Can you use the pivot table to aggregate them? No, you can use the pivot tables as long as you don't have new columns. If one of your areas has a bonus column and the other one doesn't, that won't work because they're different data sources at that point. But if you have the same exact data source with the empty rows, that's fine. Yeah. Let me go ahead and insert a pivot chart to show you how simple it is to kind of show a visual representation. Let me use a bar chart. I'm going to use a bar chart here. And this is just a very simple chart. Let me hide some things on it. I'm going to right click and I'm going to hit hide all the field buttons. And essentially I can use this chart as a visual breakdown of my report. So as I filter things, I can also see the visual of the report because it's connected to our report now. I can also break it down by month, and it'll also filter my chart for me as well. And it'll show me the breakdown of the bonus per month and the revenue per month. Let me go ahead and clear that filter there. And I'm going to close out the field list. Everybody, I don't have too much time here, but I want to hear what is your top takeaway from today's hour? What is the top takeaway before I have to hand it over to Carly here? I know she has some finishing touches. Comes to everything. Right on, Wendy. All of it. Good. Good. I like that. The visual representation. More clarity. Good. I like that. More clarity. Cool. Several people asked if this was being recorded. It is. It's also on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. I believe it will be posted. The file will be posted on offsite at the end of the session as well. Carly, I know we have 2 minutes left, and I kind of took up so much of this time. I get excited when I talk about pivot tables, but I believe you have some things to say.
Yeah, Faz, it was awesome. Everyone, if you enjoyed today's session, use the reaction set button. Maybe give us a little bit of love in the chat. Give us a little like thumbs up if your screen's on. We'd love to hear from you.
There for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Yeah, we do have some closing notes. I'll just share my screen really quickly. I just want to remind everyone that this recording will be available in offsite. Marissa will put the link to join in there in the chat. And you can also use the QR code up on the, or the, the scanning code up on the screen to scan in and join as well. It's completely free. There's no catch there, and there'll be immediate access to the recording and the presentation deck, as well as live instructor help. So if you post a question in offsite, our instructor team will get back to you within that business day. And we also have exclusive Ask the Expert sessions every Wednesday morning. So you can actually come with your specific questions, your specific files, and we will workshop those through with you on Wednesday mornings. And you can always get, if you're not currently a Learnit client, you can get discounts on our more full length 3-hour to 6-hour workshops. So we'd love to spend more time with all of you. And just another opportunity, just an opportunity to dive deeper with us. Again, these are a couple of workshops we do have coming up. These are paid workshops, so they're a little bit more hands-on and interactive than these events that you come to on Fridays, but a lot of really great programming coming up in September. If you're interested in that, please feel free to email me directly, or you can email Marissa, and we'd love to help you enroll or just learn more, and we can share with you more about the outlines and the goals for those workshops as well. And you might get Faz as your instructor, so it's a win-win. And lastly, we do have 2 more events on Excel this coming up in September. We're transitioning to more around data visualization with Power BI. That's coming up next week. Always a super fun session, and you can do a lot of really cool things in Power BI. So whether you're a data nerd and expert, or you're a novice, you'll learn some things in that workshop next week. And then we also are doing a session more on more the soft skill side of using data to be a better leader. So we'd love to see you all in our upcoming programming to the end of the month. As always, please reach out to me via email or via offsite. And we love spending time with you on Fridays. We hope you have an amazing weekend. Thanks so much for your time and attention. See you soon. Thanks, Faz. Cheers.